Hi guys, Luna here, and welcome back to our life. We have been making our way through Baxter's epilogue, and to be quite honest, it is quite an interesting story so far, and I'm curious to see where it's been leading us, especially since there doesn't seem to be an end in sight, at least anytime soon. You opted for the sofa and eased yourself down into the variously colored cushions. It was a pleasant surprise to find that Baxter hadn't been kidding. Your seat was nice and plush. Your host busied himself with the fridge and had been intimately acquainted with fetching a can of sparkling water along with a filtered jug of still water. As he did so, you couldn't help stop yourself from taking a peek at the refrigerator shelf somewhere you're sitting, wondering how much it resembled the one in his rented condo. That had been a paltry and tragic affair, not surprising, and thankfully it was a thing of the past. Baxter now kept a healthy range of foodstuffs in his own home. He was looking after himself. Having taken care of refreshments, Baxter made his way over to you and seated himself in a chair. Your glasses, veiled with fresh condensation, was placed on the coffee table. You went to an effort at placing coasters underneath each one with his now free hands. A minute pause was filled by the two of you slowly sipping your drinks. Then Baxter returned his glass to its place and took a stab at conversation. He elected for something easy, starting to run over the plans for tomorrow once more, with a focus specifically on what you would be doing, rather than the happy couple.
Now,
to clarify, I will take care of the decorations in the morning, alongside Terry, Miranda, and other members of Drew's family. In the meantime, you'll need to... and so forth. It was a subject entirely within his wheelhouse, and you nodded vaguely along as he went through the itinerary and stages, asking him questions if you needed clarification. Eventually, he ran out of details to touch upon, and both he ran out of stuff to drink. It was decided that now was the time to tackle the remainder of the cake. In the kitchen once again, Baxter retrieved the carrot cake from the freezer and placed it on the wooden cutting board with the same gentleness as if it was a newborn baby. What came next was entirely incompatible to childcare. He selected a large serrated knife from a block on the counter. He passed over the stencil prepared earlier while he tested the surface of the cake with his fingers. Satisfied with the consistency and temperature, he put the stencil on top. There was a moment of adjustment, lining the paper up so that the cake was centered underneath. Then Baxter made a small murmur of relief.
hallelujah.
Thank goodness the cake didn't turn out too small. This should be doable. All I have to do is follow the guidelines and we'll have it nicely laid out. Yeah, no sweats. You stepped back to give him enough space to work toward without bumping his elbows. With a knife in one hand and the other pressing down on the stencils to steady it, Baxter set about carving. He worked slowly, methodically, removing the bulk of excess with a straight, clean cuts that merely scraped the outlines of the stencil. Then, moving inwards, he began to refine the curved edges. The scraps of surplus cake were tossed into the pan that had been baked in, forming a small mound of crumbly fragments. You wondered if he ever watched your Xavier do something like this before, or perhaps he'd seen one of the many cake competition shows on these days. His form was solid. Regardless, once there was no cake left protruding from underneath the stencil, he peeled back the paper to reveal a controller-shaped cake. While there was, of course, the expected outcome, the whole point of making a template, in fact, you were experiencing a thrill at seeing it work. Baxter was happy about it as you were. He beamed up at you, making a brief jazz motion to emphasize the finished product, like he performed a magic trick. When Controller Cake ordered, our hard work with the guideline paid off magnificently. Thanks, you did a good job. Thank you as well. Now, in terms of decorating, if it's not too much, I'll pass the mantle to you at this point. Cutting the custom design stretched me to the limits of my abilities, and the final design would look far better with a more professional touch.
Is that fine?
I hate to put the responsibility on you, but it is the most visible part of the process. Please, it'll be fine. I'm a Confederate genius. Thank you. Naturally, I'll stay out of your way in case my tears all melt the frosting. He started to tidy the work surface a little, sweeping stray crumbs and fragments of carrot cake into the crumpled hands of the shepherding them into the waste disposal. Baxter gathered the supplies. He brought out the bowls of frosting and arranged them in a neat line on the counter beside the cutting board. He heaped a hearty dollop of bright red frosting onto the controller and began to apply it evenly. The irregular shape presented you with an enjoyable challenge. The corners where the handles joined with the main body of the controller required some finesse in order to coat uniformly, and you briefly mourned the lack of a proper offset spatula, not to mention a turntable. You thought the tools that Xavier must have at their disposal with envy. You wondered if one day you'll ever swap tips with them. Baxter asked questions about this and that while he worked. He listened to your commentary with keen interest and offered his apologies, though probably not wholly sincere for the absence of more professional equipment. I am ashamed to admit that I had never heard of many of these things before today, or rather I don't remember any of it. I have a bad habit of missing details whenever Xavier goes into too much depth about their craft.
You know.
But now I'm glad for the opportunity to be educated. I can't hardly complain. It was nice to have him for an apprentice, he thought. Buoyed by his enthusiasm, he made short work of the crumb coat and base layer frosting. From there, you added the remaining details using a couple makeshift piping bags. Those were engineered by simply snipping off the corners of some plastic Ziploc bags. The buttons and joysticks were laden not quite black, with some almost but not exactly white used for the markings. And that completed the illusion. The dessert had taken on the form of a modern electronic device. You stood back to admire your handiwork. It didn't look bad at all. Mom would have said that if it was good enough to eat. It was never going to complete with a fully 3D creation like a commercial bakery would have made, but for a homemade cake prepared at the last minute, it would do just fine. Scott and Jude were going to love it, and you were convinced. Baxter was fawning over the finished cake with a mixture of pride and abject relief. He put a hand to his chest, puffing out an exaggerated breath. It's finished. We have a group cake. With this, we can hope to see the couple's dreams fulfilled a little more fully.
You are incredible.
I'm grateful for your help, Luna. Truly, this wouldn't have been possible without you. I tried to point out that he probably would have managed on his own, but Baxter dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. It is, if not for your company, I would like to be scraping cake off the walls, and besides, I wouldn't have suggested making the groom's cake in the first place if not for my prior experience with overnight confetti cake.
See?
I have to you to thank for that, see? A watertight argument. You'll simply have to accept my appreciation. He fixed you with his most winning smile, attempting to dazzle you into submission. Alright, fine, have it your way. I'm amazing. Where would this wedding be without me? You looked down at the fruits, cake, at your combined labor. Yeah, I did a little wobble seeing Baxter so happy. With the utmost care, Baxter proceeded to put the cake safely into a container and stow it into the fridge, arranging things so that it had its own dedicated shelf for ease of retrieval. A glance at the clock and his wall showed up at past 1 in the morning. Oh no, he hadn't counted on finishing up that late. Baxter's expression tense. He'd realized the same issue. Then his shoulders slumped and he made a gripe of displeasure at the back of his throat.
Oh.
It'll be almost 2 a.m. by the time we get back to Scott and Jude's house. I'm sorry, I should have been better prepared. At least you'll be able to let yourself in. Oh no, speaking of better prepared, you should have definitely thought to ask Jude for a spare key. Not unless you have any spare hairpins lying around, cause I don't have a key. Baxter's brows furrowed once again, and he began to worry his bottom lip with his teeth. You could almost see the machinery turning over in his brain. I see. It's far too late at tonight for us to wake them up. Not with their extremely important day today. Ran a hand through his hair, letting his head back fall again, sighing with expiration. This has been a complete failure on my part. It seems I am not a very good player.
Forgive me.
I can only apologize, Luna. You need your rest as much as anyone. If you aren't totally opposed to it, you could take the guest room here for the night. I kept it furnished just in case, though it has yet to see use. You'll be welcome to sleep there, and I can drop you off back at Scott and Jude's in the morning, so you'll have the opportunity to get changed before the event. If you're sure you don't mind. Though you accept the offer as calmly as you can manage, your mind was reeling. You were doing something you could have only dreamed of a few days ago. It almost didn't seem possible. Life could be pretty amazing sometimes. I know it's not ideal, but thank you for being flexible, Luna. And here I was thinking that it was my talent. His tone was light and humorous, filled with that typical Baxter sparkle, but you noticed that his eyes were softer, more restrained. He averted his gaze, seeming hesitant. I wonder if... Cut himself off, flinching before an imagined impact. He raised a hand towards you as if to touch the hand you had resting on the countertop. He thought better of it, reaching instead to pat you on the arm. Baxter didn't meet your eyes or even continue where you left off. We should get some sleep. Yes, we should. Passing out in the middle of the wedding wasn't exactly on your bucket list. The two of you promptly made ready for bed. Baxter showed you down the hallway to the guest room, then rooted around in one of the bathroom cabinets for a spare toothbrush. You didn't have pajamas, and Baxter seemed either unwilling or simply too awkward about the situation to offer you any spares. It was fine. You managed with just the clothes you had. After satisfying himself that you were settled as you could be, Baxter bade a brief farewell.
Take care.
Rest well, Luna. I'll see you bright and early in the morning. You aren't gonna stay up until dawn again, are you? So you remember that night as well? Don't worry. Maintaining a full-time career fixed that bad habit long ago. Mostly. Baxter bobbed his head before ducking away completely inside his bedroom. He closed the door. You headed into your room. You went straight over to the spare bed and tucked yourself in. Sleep had a good graces of not keeping you waiting. Not after such a tiring day. Soon you were drifting off into a deep slumber, head empty save for the smell of unfamiliar bedsheets and carrot cake. You were woken up by the shrill sound of an alarm that you'd vaguely remember setting on your phone the night before. You fumbled around on the bedside table to turn it off. Sitting up in bed, blearily yawning, you could see that it was a beautiful day. The sky was a pristine blue. The tops of the nearby buildings were gilded in the morning sun. You dressed and ambled out into the living room, sleepily wondering what Baxter might have done in the way of breakfast. That was until you were confronted with something that chased all thought of food from your head. From down the hallway came some sort of clattering, thumping noises. Every so often you could make out a muttered curse and the sound of someone moving about. The door of the master bedroom was ajar, though you couldn't make anything out from the crack. The commotion was coming from inside. Was Baxter okay? You approached the door, curious as to see what the commotion was about, the ruckus intensifying as you got closer. It sounded as though California was experiencing a miniature earthquake, localized entirely in the back corner of one 11th floor apartment, which was in the process of upending his belongings. You caught another snatch of Baxter's voice. There was a groan of frustration, and he muttered an expression that you could have sworn was clucking a bell, or at least something very much like it. Baxter? You called tentatively through the crack in the door, but there was no response. Tried again, louder this time, still nothing. Peering into the room, you could see the untidy mess of pants and shoes and other articles of clothing littering the floor. You watched as purple button-down sailed suddenly into view and landed into the heap. Your attention was drawn to the far wall past the chaos, where an assortment of knickknacks are arranged on 2 sets of shelves. You spotted a familiar picture frame among them. The shock of recognition came from a tingling across your scalp. You kept it, the souvenir you got from him years ago. You're convinced he tossed the thing out or in the back of the drawer. The fact that he instead held on to it made you feel a complicated mix of emotions. It was as sad as it was touching. But now was not the time to unpack it, however. At that moment, you wanted to see the man himself, but no matter how you tried, you couldn't catch sight of Baxter from out in the hallway. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You pushed the door open, stepping a short ways inside. On the same side of the room as the entrance, you discovered the opening to a walk-in closet, and at the far end of the closet, it took you a second to realize what you were looking at. There was Baxter Ward, in the flesh. The flesh and almost nothing else. He happened to be rummaging through his collected wardrobe while wearing only boxers and a pair of socks. He had been facing away, initially showing his exposed back. Interesting. Then he turned and you were greeted with a full view of his naked torso. When your brain caught up with what was going on, you couldn't stop yourself letting out a little snort of amazement. Baxter didn't startle, having caught sight of you in the corner of his peripheral vision.
Terrible morning, isn't it?
Hello, Luna. Terrible morning, isn't it? I was not expecting that that line to be voice acted. Your heart was pumping and your head was buzzing. He was... wow. I feel like, to be completely honest, my instinct is both 180 and he really stared, mouth and gape. But I also want to do raise a hand and greeting, but I'm gonna go with merely stare and mouth and gape. Scenes left you speechless. Baxter spun on his feet and resumed his work without explanation. Your eyes kept being drawn to places they really shouldn't be, and wait. You felt the blood rush to your face as your eyes zeroed in on a second wall of Baxter's, one of which you never seen before. It was on the rear side of his left thigh, very high up. It had always been covered up by clothes. Even shorts of reasonable length would do the trick. You might not have ever seen it before. This, whatever it was. You wrenched your gaze away and silently braided yourself, wiggling him while his back was turned. So are things okay in here? Baxter gave a terse sigh, his fingers continuing to comb through his collection of shirts and jackets. They could be better, let's put it that way. I am sorry my room is in such a state. You caught me with my pants down in more ways than one. I simply cannot find my work uniform. It is not an official matter, but there is a particular shirt I always like to wear when I'm on duty at weddings. Tell me is identify as staff, you say.
I swear.
But it's missing. What I should have done was taking the time to set my clothes last night. Unfortunately, I was distracted with baking and frosting in a new guest in my home. His features took on a pinched, agitated quality, his eyes darting distractedly about the room. Either way, I have to hunt it down, or we're going to be late. A faint edge of panic began to creep into his voice. He then started to append the closet with increased urgency. Is there something I can do to help? Baxter made a noise through his teeth. That won't be necessary. Thank you, though. I already made such a mess of the place that you wouldn't be able to make much headway. There always seems to be something waiting to go wrong. Baxter grumbled as he relentlessly shifted through the closet, as much to himself as to anyone else. He wondered if he had a habit of thinking aloud even when he was alone. Part of the tragedy of adult life is learning to roll with the punches, so to speak. I suppose I should be proud of the fact that I can at least handle it much better than when I was a younger. Thinking about what kind of panic a younger Baxter would have thrown into a prospect of missing a shirt on an important day. He made a comical sputter of disgust, like he was experiencing a full-body shiver. He smiled, recalling the first time he ever interacted with Baxter this early in the day. It had left such a strong impression, you doubted he would ever forget. He'd been so flustered, It was like you stumbled across a whole different person, wearing Baxter's pajamas and face. Nothing like the man you knew, who was frustrated, sure, but still managed to approach a situation without letting it crush him, even in just his boxers. Your brain couldn't help but remind you of a strange coincidence that Baxter almost undressed in front of you that other occasion 5 years ago. There was no almost about the present situation. You wondered how your past self would have reacted if you couldn't somehow be able to tell them about this. It's a good thing you couldn't really. Their mind might have burst. Back then, you hadn't gone to see the little pinch of Baxter's waist, or the flare of his hip bones, or the way they snuggled. I'm not going to finish the sentence, but I'm just going to say, actually, you need to stop thinking about this for a minute. There was sunshine of euphoria from the back of the closet, jolting you out of your train of thought. Baxter stumbled back into the room, a black button-down clutching victoriously in one hand. Hallelujah. I found it, finally.
Honestly.
A close call if I ever had one. I appreciate you coming to lend your support, Luna. If you don't mind giving me a minute, I'll be dressing with you shortly. Although, he gave a small giggle, looking down at himself. Since you've already seen me like this, it doesn't make much sense that the time you need to leave is while I put my clothes on. But still, I'm sure you got better things to do than watch the cleanup of a train wreck. There's something I want to say, but I'm just gonna say, yeah, I'll get the cake out of the fridge.
See you.
Now that is a plan. See you in a bit then. You left him to get decent, heading down the hall and into the kitchen. You brought the cake out with careful fingers and set it onto the counter. After that, you sat down in the living room to wait. It wasn't long until Baxter appeared. You were gazing out of a window when you heard the click of shoes on the hard floor, followed shortly after by the man himself, sauntering into view. He cleans up. Definitely looks good. He was smartly dressed in black from top to tail. His slacks were crisp and pressed. Why is it top to tail, not top to foot? His slacks were crisp and pressed, his shoes polished, and miraculously, his shirt seemed to have survived the ordeal without getting creased. He took a cursory glance over the marble counters, spying the finished
Excellent.
Thank you for taking care of that. If there's nothing else to attend to, we should get on our way. You readily agreed, picking up your bag and joining him by the front door. A short trip down the elevator, and both you and the cake were safely bundled into Baxter's car. He pulled out of his parking space and set course for the suburbs once more. It was still early, and the air crisp as it waved through the rolled windows. Baxter leaned one arm on his door, cool and casual. Since we're keeping our creation surprise, I'll take it to the venue, so don't worry about leaving it here. I'll hop out with you to say hello to the betrothed, though.
Now,
as for what happens next, I thought we could... The pair of you naturally waded into discussion on the minutiae of the wedding plan. You had already been over most of it, but it was the confidence boosting to have it laid out once more. As Baxter described it to you once, weddings and similar occasions were a kind of ritual. You'd suppose that obsessing over the little details was a crucial part of another kind of ritual. Surprisingly, you had begun to feel almost like Baxter's colleague, a fellow planner endearing to bring this event to fruition. You certainly put in the work by this point. The conversation didn't stop at your own responsibilities for the day. Baxter reiterated that he, together with Terry, Miranda, and the other members of Jude's family, would be decorating the wedding hall over the course of the morning. The marriage would be conducted late afternoon, with a sit-down dinner reception in the evening, so there was still plenty of time to prepare. This detour back to Scott and Jude's was for you to change into your outfits. You couldn't exactly come to their big day in the casual clothes you slept in the previous night. You would regroup with the rest of the crew after freshening up. Even though Jude at least knew the reason for it, your cheeks got heated at the prospect of showing back up with Baxter after spending the night at his place. It felt so scandalous. Mr. Ward didn't give them the same impression as Terry or Cove or any of the other men you knew, really. Crashing with them was totally cool, no questions to be had. But Baxter? Someone both suggestive and inaccessible, staying in his apartment would raise eyebrows. And that was without mentioning the fashion in which your morning had started. It was too late to take it back now. Not that you would even want to. You relished the final calm before the storm until Baxter stopped the car across the street from the soon-to-be Adam house. That was typical, though this time he couldn't pull up into the driveway because there was already an occupancy station there. So a shockingly red sports car had been parked facing the road. It was spotless. Its spotless painted body gleamed in the ever-intensing rays of sun. The rental, you assumed, Baxter had come through yet again. It was almost exactly the same shade of the controller cake tucked safely away in the back seat. You bet good money that the motorhead wouldn't be the only one thrown to right in it. Walking past the vehicle on the way to the front door, you and Baxter paused to admire the sleek profile and elegant curves. The quartet somehow looked better up close. The gloss of the paint was reflective. In the entry, Baxter rapped on the door with a knuckle. You noticed that he did this in spite of the fact that there was a doorbell. Maybe just another one of his inexplicable mannerisms. After a brief pause, there was footsteps inside, and then Scott was standing in the open doorway. He greeted you enthusiastically, full of restive energy. Hey, welcome back. Oh, Baxter too. Good morning. Being confronted by the groom, you were in the process of keeping a secret from caught you off guard. It would have been prudent to go over the plan for this on the ride over. Baxter, however, had no problem acting fine under pressure.
How are you?
Good morning to you, Scott. And how are you feeling today? Excited? Nervous?
I don't know.
Maybe both. Oh, yeah, definitely both. I thought I'd never sleep. There was more commotion in the hallway. Jude came jogging up behind to greet you over Scott's shoulder.
You made it.
Hey, you made it. How was your night with Terry and Randy, Luna? His demeanor was cool and calm, exuding total confidence despite the nonsensical question. You quickly surmised that sleeping over at your friend's place must have been the cover story. You hastened to school your expression, not wanting to give the game away. Oh yeah, it was great fun. We were up all night swapping embarrassing sibling stories. I'll never be able to look at you the same way, Jude. You relished the brief flash of panic that crossed Jude's face before he remembered it was a work of fiction. Since you've put yourself out for him, you reasoned there would be no harm in a little teasing. Fortunately, Scott wasn't the least bit suspicious. His mind obviously preoccupied on more matrimonial topics. You could practically see the daydream bubble of Scott skipping down the aisle. I wanted to stop by briefly to see how you were both feeling before this afternoon, and I happened to bump Luna on the driveway. Well rested, you?
It's good.
Yep, I'm good. Somehow managed to get Scott to go to bed, too. That's true. Jude knows the art of relaxation.
Of course.
You do, huh? Of course. It's wonderful that there's nothing to worry about on that front. Everything is running smoothly with regards to the preparations. Here, Baxter gave Jude a meaningful look. You cracked into a small grin behind Scott's back. Message received. So you can focus on getting yourselves ready for your moment without concern. Although if anything comes up, please don't hesitate to give me a call. You stifled a giggle throughout that exchange in spite of yourself, seeing Baxter suavely passing veiled messages when he'd been such a frantic mess half an hour before. It was too funny. Honestly, the fact that he was still able to pull such an abrupt about face to let his own stress fade into the background and surface of pure professionalism is kind of hot. And just like that, you weren't in danger of laughing anymore. Baxter cleared his throat, glancing at his phone. I best get to the venue, since everything is in hand here. Terry and Miranda have already arrived there.
I appreciate this.
Right, don't let us keep you. And thanks, Baxter, for everything. We really appreciate what you've done for us. Jude made it as though to offer his agreement, but Baxter smiled and raised a hand to stem the flow of gratitude.
My pleasure.
You're too kind. However, as it stands, my job is only half finished. I'll be only too happy to accept your words once the wedding is over, and to do so now would be premature. Sure, dude, but thanks anyways. Jude met your gaze as he said this, to include you in the sentiment. You soundly hoped that baking lived up to her rising hopes. Baxter nodded and turned to leave, before doubling back to catch you briefly by the elbow. I'll see you later, Luna. Terry should come by to pick you up once you've had the opportunity to get changed. See you later, B-Man. Baxter smiled warmly and gave you an arm, a nearly imperceptible squeeze before letting go. His goodbyes said, Baxter wasted no time. He strode briskly down the driveway and got into his car, spinning you a wave as he drove away. Behind you, Scott cleared his throat.
So,
come in, Luna. June and I were just starting to get ready ourselves. Do whatever you gotta do, and, there's finally a key for you on the kitchen counter. Yeah, we remember that one a little late. They certainly had, but you couldn't pretend as if you asked for it. Or that you were mad you got more time with Baxter. Now I got some pants to iron. You vanished into the basin, you spring a step. As you were crossing the threshold, Jude mumbled it to you under his breath. Hey, help yourself to food in the kitchen. Not sure if you had to pass on breakfast this morning, or... You spoke guiltily, but you brushed it aside. You lost out on some sleep, but the look on Scott's face would be worth it. It's okay. Thanks, Jude. We're left to your own devices for the remaining of the morning. Availing yourself of Drew's offer, you cobbled together a quick breakfast before heading upstairs and taking a well-earned shower. As for a treat for working hard, you indulged yourself the hot water for a while. But eventually you returned to the other guest room that had been loaned to you and hauled your suitcase onto the bed before fishing out your wedding attire. God, I'm torn between dress, like blouse and pants, or like a blouse and skirt. No, I feel like with the character I'm developing, blouse and pants. It was a relief to see that the journey hadn't wrinkled anything too much. You weren't going to be turning heads for the wrong reasons. When you had come to your look finalized, there was a little left to do other than wait for Terry to come collect you. It felt funny to be loafing around the house dressed to the nines. Not like it was your first time you got into that. Fortunately, you weren't left to your own devices much longer. Shortly before noon, a car honked and your phone alerted you of a text. It was Terry, thoroughly making you aware that he'd arrived. You sprang to your feet from the sofa you'd been lounging on, pausing in the hallway to give you a quick goodbye to Scott and Jude, wherever they were, then dashed out the front door. Terry's van was parked across the street, the place of Baxter's car had occupied before. You went around the passenger side and popped the door open.
Preposterous!
Ooh, you're looking fancy in your collared shirts and vests, Terry. Someone's looking fancy. Where are you off to today, madame? Oh, over in the driver's seat, Terry was wearing a swanky-looking waistcoat and enormous grin. He looked so eager that if you hadn't known better, you would have guessed it was him getting married. You pulled your sweetest, most puppy dog-eyed expression, milking it for everything it was worth. On my way to a wedding, but it's oh so far to walk in this heat. What a poor, helpless personage to do. Terry laughed uproariously. Oscar-winning material right there. Now hurry up and get in already. The Erics are waiting at the venue. You did as instructed, climbing into the cab and buckling yourself in. Terry rammed the van into gear and pulled off, wasting no time in heading back to the way he came. As the car picked up speed, he drummed his hand on the steering wheel adamantly. It's finally here, the big one, I'm ready for it. Just try not to bawl too loudly during the vows.
Yeah!
What? Now you two. Miranda almost stuffed a whole box of tissues in your purse this morning. Just in case. I'm not that bad. Okay, sure, there was the one time with the video of a three-legged kid where I cried so hard I couldn't see and walked straight into a wall. But we don't talk about that. Besides, Cove's cutting. How's anybody gonna talk about me when the master's right there? I'll have us treading water before anyone can say I do. That's certainly true. It made sense as emotions were shown via tears most of all. Cove was a child of the sea, only fitting it that his happiness would overflow in the form of salt water. You whiled away the journey in idle conversation, most of it in wedding focus. The preparations were already well underway, but Terry was keen to stress that your assistance would be very welcome. The route brought you into the heart of the big city. Both the wedding and the reception were to be held on the upper floor in one of the many skyscrapers that dominated the urban sprawl. Terry parked in a lot of the shadow of a high-rise, and after an extended elevator ride, the doors opened. Oh, this is gorgeous. Love large windows too, and like the ceiling lights. He stepped into a spacious room flooded with sunlight.
So?
Ooh, you're looking snazzy. I like the way that I like the cut of your jib. Wish you had like a little bow tie or tie or something. It would really brought it all together, but still looking very snazzy. And here we are. Impressive, isn't it? They know how to pick a place. You couldn't help but agree. The wedding hall, which was basically an entire floor of the building, boasted floor-to-ceiling windows. The effect was dizzying. The whole city was at your feet. You weren't able to admire the view for long, however. The place was in a frenzy of preparation. No sooner had you arrived than you were being swept up in it. Baxter made a beeline for you the moment he heard that elevator doors open, his wedding planner persona firmly in place.
Nice to see you.
Ah, excellent. It's good to see you both. Excuse the brevity, but as you can see, we're well underway with the setting centerpieces already. You exchanged a brief nod of acknowledgement before he gestured for you and Terry to join Miranda, hard at work at the table at the far end of the hall. God, that's a gorgeous dress. And it's pinkish purple, fitting of Miranda too. Like, ugh. Kind of reminds me of the dress that I made for my persona, Nebula, the channel side mascot of the looks very fitting, very nice. She was wearing a simple yet elegant pink dress and a long hair flowed in rivets and of immaculately arranged curls. Tara called out to her in greeting, and she turned and waved you over, beaming. Great, you're here. You look lovely, Luna. You made it back to Jude and Scott's without any trouble, I guess? She held in close and gave you a fervent look around the room as if her brother's fiancé might be in earshot by some freak accent.
Thank you.
Baxter filled us in on your alibi. Thank you so much for making an extra cake. I know Jude was beating himself up over that. She pointed to a table a short distance away. An unassuming white platter and cover rested there. A gift from one groom to another, courtesy of Luna and Baxter's Bakery. Yeah, it looks pretty great. Scott's gonna love it for sure. I hope so. They both will. Let's get to it. Yeah, I really hope they like it because we worked super hard on it. And it, fingers crossed at the very least. I'm sorry, I just got a notification for something. Terry let out a startled grunt as Miranda dumped a box of guest favorites into his arms before picking up another two of her own. Sorry, we don't have time to stand around. Luna, would you grab that last box over there? We need to take them to... A hectic afternoon of busy work ensued. Everyone had been saying it, but this was something you only truly understood well in the thick of it. There's so much to do. Tables to decorate, seeing plans to consult, name cards to sort, row chairs to sit out, garlands to hang, and ribbons to tie, and candles to place into candlesticks. Miranda's parents were sitting at one of the dining tables dressed in a matching suit and dress, folding napkins like their lives depended on it. They'd been clearly practicing. It was funny. You thought while unpacking the centerpieces to see so many people losing about in former clothing. You wondered if this was what butlers felt like all the time. At the eye of the storm was Baxter, coordinating the efforts with poise and expertise beyond his years. The tension only served to make him sharper, more focused in pursuit of perfection. He was the common nexus to all your efforts, the axle well around which the room resolved faster and faster. You suppose this was just another kind of dance to him. It felt impossible to keep track of everything that was happening. You blinked, and then Xavier was there, delivering their confectionery masterpiece in its grandeur. You joined the concealed groom's cake on the dessert table. You happened to catch a glimpse of Xavier sneaking a peek under the lid. It looked that he approved. Maybe. There was a surprise. There was, surprise, not a spare minute to stop and chat with him directly. They had a business to get back to, and Hero said you were also otherwise occupied. So occupied, in fact, that several hours passed without you realizing it. That better be the last one. I am never training another place setting for the rest of my life. Terry slumped into a chair, making a big show of looking short of breath. Miranda plopped herself down in the chair next to him and gave him a playful jab on the ribs with her elbow. Wish granted. There's not a lot of reason you need to do that again. Aw, you could have let me milk the drama for a bit. Sorry again. It's too late now. Stop it. We should... hey, you okay? Terry put a hand on Miranda's shoulder, concerned. She began massaging the back of her ankles, wincing a little.
It'll be okay.
Am I right? It's these shoes. I don't know why I thought it'd be a good idea to prepare the venue in these new pair when I could have worn my regular sandals and swapped them out before the guests arrives. Sorry. At least there's not a lot of reasons you need to decorate a wedding in pumps again? Yeah, he sobbed it. Miranda sobbed startled at a loud clapping that rang through the hall. Baxter was standing at the far end, saying together. The room quickly fell silent.
Bravo!
If I could have your attention, everyone, I think I'm right in saying that we now have completed the necessary preparations for the main events. You performed an admirable job. From this point on, the wedding should proceed without any further difficulties. So I'd like you all to invite you to the special occasion starting now. You earned it. That said, I received word that the guests have begun to congregate in the foyer downstairs. You only need to join them to wait for the grooms to make their arrival. Thank you. You shared a look with Terry and Miranda before the three of you, with no small amount of effort, got on your feet as you headed toward the elevators. Baxter came alongside you. The attention was off him for the moment, and he eased into a more casual posture, with one hand in his pocket, very suave. He addressed you each in turn. Terry, Miranda, Luna, good work each of you.
Thank you.
In my capacity as an organizer, I wouldn't normally say this, but it's been a relief to be able to count on you today, this whole week in fact. Don't say that. It's the least I could do for Jude, even in spite of his lack of forethought. She sighed. I feel bad you weren't seeing my brother at his best all the time. I love him, but sometimes his head is completely up his own butt. Baxter's cool countenance gave way to a son's snort, which he tried and failed to cover up with his hand. He never anticipated Miranda of all people to be the one to say such a thing. It was rare, but she knew how to choose her moments carefully. It was a bit of a treat. Terry gave a dramatic gasp of indignation and rounded her with a face of astonishment.
Yeah!
Randy, you can't say that at a wedding. Miranda only grinned up at her boyfriend, innocent as an angel. It's a good thing for both of us that the wedding hasn't started yet. It was no good trying to keep a straight face. Both you and Baxter exchanged helpless glances before joining in the laughter wholeheartedly. It had been a trying few days. You're feeling it, now more than ever. But you made it though with a little help of your friends, and no small amount of silliness. Baxter cleared his throat, regaining his composure to the best of his ability.
So...
that being said, we should get her, butts downstairs. After you, Luna. He prodded into the elevator and made the ride down into the lobby, prickling with anticipation as the floor number grew closer and closer to one. The double doors opened to the bustling energy. A thronging host of guests were lingering about, chattering excitedly amongst themselves. Baxter gave you a proper tip of his head and darted off into the crowd, essentially to take care of arrangements for when the couple arrived. Terry and Miranda followed not far behind. You stayed put while they went around to give their welcomes. Unlike you, they knew a fair number of people in attendance. Still, there was one ever-familiar face in the crowd. Man, you've gone tall. Towering impressively almost everyone else, yet standing awkward off to one side, was a man with a gentle face and a hair color of sea of glass. Carefully picked your way through the crowd. Honestly, that's a nice looking shirt too. You were pleased to see him, but you couldn't forget where you were. This is a wedding and demanding your best behavior. Cove spotted you as you drew near. His face lit up with relief. You drew him into a big hug. Cove had many good qualities, but being premium hug material is definitely one of the better ones. He made a small sound before his arms wrapped around you instinctively. When you drew apart again, Cove was regarding you with fondness. Sup?
Luna!
Hey Luna, missed you. His tenure was soft, full of sincerity. He tugged at your heartstrings to hear it in person say again. I mean, I know it's not only been a week, but that's okay. I missed you too. It's kind of a sensation that you only truly recognize the instance you gave voice to it. It's the truth. You've been missing Cove all the way through this ordeal. And hearing his feelings echo back at him, Cove positively beamed. He basked in the shared sentiment for a while, not really speaking, content to simply beam together.
So...
How did the preparations go with the preparations and stuff with Baxter, the wedding planning? There was a faint outward lift to the way he said Baxter's name, kind of like he was unsure if he remembered it correctly, though, of course, that wasn't really the reason. Cove had found it just as hard as the rest of you to believe that your old acquaintance had reappeared. He was still not yet accustomed to including the name in his vocabulary. The wedding's gonna be great, and Baxter. Cove scratched the side of his face with his finger a little awkwardly. That's great about the wedding, and Baxter too, I guess. I don't know. Your reunion was cut short by the sudden shift in surrounding ambience. Constance's hubbub was rising in intensity, reaching in fever pitch. Something was happening. All around you, people were turning to face the entrance, craning their necks and peering around each other to get a better look. Through the glass doors, you made out a familiar splash of scarlet. There were several appreciative whispers from the congregation. A low whistle came from somewhere nearby, and he overheard a guest to announce to his neighbor that the car was a Corvette. Baxter was at the head of assembly, ready and waiting to throw open the doors. Ooh, looking sharp. Finger snaps. I love the design of Jude's outfit. I love the texture of it. I love the color palettes between the two. Look very snazzy. The two men exited the stylish ride dressed in even more fashionable suits. The grooms had arrived. And with that, I think this is a perfect place to end this episode here. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys have a good day, night, week, month of your lives, and may the stars forever guide your path wherever it might lead you into the future. And hope to see you guys again soon.